Federal Judge Paula Zinnes is once again directing the Trump administration to provide her with more information on their efforts to return Kilmar Abrego Garcia. That's the man, of course, wrongly deported to a Salvadorian mega prison in March.
On Wednesday, Judge Zinnes set deadlines this month for administration officials to provide sworn testimony on the administration's efforts to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return. Trump seemed to throw a wrench in the government's case. During his 100-day interview with ABC News this week, the president said he had the power to bring Abrego Garcia back, but seemed to say that he would not do so. Let's listen.
You could get him back. There's a phone on this desk.
I could.
You could pick it up, and with all the power of the presidency, you could call up the president of El Salvador and say, send him back right now.
And if he were the gentleman that you say he is, I would do that.
But the court has ordered you to facilitate that.
I'm not the one making this decision. We have lawyers that don't want to do this.
But the buck stops in this office.
No.
This all comes as new video shows Venezuelan detainees at the Blue Bonnet detention facility in Anson, Texas, spelling out SOS, as you can see there on your screen. The men being held there narrowly avoided deportation to that Salvadorian mega prison, but they were turned around at or close to the airport after a Supreme Court ruling ordering that those detainees be given reasonable time to contest their pending removals.
Meanwhile, an investigation by the New York Times is raising new questions about whether the Trump administration did vet the people they were sending to the foreign prison. In the agreement between the U.S. and El Salvador, Salvadorian President Nayib Bukele agreed to only house what he called convicted criminals. Many of those labeled gang members by the Trump administration had actually never been tried in court. The report says Bukele is demanding more information about the individuals who were previously deported to his prison, and the administration is scrambling to respond.
A sore point for the Trump administration, I think. To my mind, it's fairly clear that their belief that this particular case would redound to their political benefit isn't really working. There was a very interesting Fox News poll that split out the topic of border security, on which Trump still scores quite highly, from that of deportations, where it was a much more even split. The fundamental problem with Abrego Garcia, you and I have talked about it before, is his deportation was fundamentally lawless because there's an immigration court order saying you cannot deport this guy to El Salvador, he'll be in danger. That order was never invalidated, it still stands, and they did it anyway. That's the problem. Now, whether he's a fantastic guy or not, whether he's a member of MS-13 or not, is beside the point. The point is that there was that order and the Trump administration disregarded it.
Look, it is beside the point in terms of the legal argument. That is true, and I have said repeatedly that I think, per the judge's order, the Trump administration should make its best effort to facilitate his return to the country so that he can be deported elsewhere. I think it is very reasonable to question whether they are making a good faith effort to do just that. Trump seemed to suggest, now Trump is there basically, he said, interestingly enough, I would do it, but I think he is a bad guy. I think given the visits to him by Democratic figures and the way the media has reported on his, initially characterized him as like this loving Maryland father, conservatives have sought to make relevant elements of his backstory that, again, don't matter for the legal case, but maybe complicate this from a political matter. That there was a New York Post report this week on his wife's ex contesting in court that he was certainly that she was dating a member of a gang. Yeah. There is a tremendous amount of evidence to suggest that he was in fact in a gang.
Well, hold on. Now, on that New York Post story, I thought that was very thin. I completely acknowledge that two separate immigration court judges back in the day, yes, 2018 or 19, found he was a member of a gang. The thing that the New York Post published was the wife's ex saying she was dating an unnamed gang member. But I mean, if we're going to take every claim made in a custody case between former partners as gospel, we'd be in a whole lot of trouble.
I wouldn't hang it on just that, but that in addition to the court findings.
Yeah, but I mean,
I'm saying
but none of them change the legality of it.
No, I know, but well, right, but the conservative response to I'm telling you what the right is saying about it. They're saying this is a gang member. It has been pretty well demonstrated in court. The court has bought that argument for good reason. This is a gang member. This is a man from El Salvador. He is now back in El Salvador. And we're not going to go out on a limb to have him returned. That is the conservative position.
But that
he
position...
he is in the country that he is a citizen of.
But that position involves defiance of American courts. That's the problem. That it involves the administration saying, doesn't really matter what the court says, we'll decide. That's the danger in this case. That is why Democrats are saying, look, this is about the rule of law. That's the central point, much as the related, though separate, case about the deportation flights is part of that debate. Judge Boasberg in the deportation flights ordering flights to be turned around and the administration saying, tough, we're just going to go ahead with them. That's where the difficulty arises. Now, just briefly on the gang member point, we didn't play it there, and I'm not sure if you discussed it yesterday, but in that ABC interview, shout out to Terry Moran. We often hit establishment media figures here, but he was very good when Trump appeared to believe that a photo of Abrego Garcia's hands that has definitely been photoshopped had not.
Right. The photo is to claim that the tattoos, the symbols are the interpretation is MS-13, not that it actually says MS-13 on his fingers.
Right.
Trump seemed unaware of that, and I think I criticized him on Twitter for it yesterday. Yes, that is not, the piece of evidence is not that he actually literally has the letters and numbers MS-13 on his fingers. I think there's plenty of other evidence, and that's, again, not just my opinion, was the court's opinion. Look, this is kind of a tricky situation. Like, you talk about the rule of law. I agree the Trump administration should do what the judge says, although facilitate his return is open a little bit to interpretation, or at least they're making the argument now that we have to reorganize the entire foreign policy of the country to return a man who's not a citizen of this country, who is a citizen of El Salvador. I mean, what if the rule of law of El Salvador? What if their position is, this is our guy, and you're trying to kidnap him back to a foreign country to which he has no identity?
But Robby, that's why Trump's remarks that we did play there are so damaging to his own case. He kind of blew up that argument when Terry Moran said to him, there's a phone right there on the desk, you could call him. And Trump said, yeah, I could. So Trump is himself admitting that he could bring the guy back if he wished to do so. And obviously he is deciding that he will not do so then. And there's where he...
The good follow-up question there would have been, well, if your objection to bringing him back is just that he's not a good guy, what about, we can go to some of those other cases, the hairdresser case, right, where there's no evidence whatsoever that he's in, it's clearly a mistake. So I would like to put that question to Trump then. If his position is we're not going to bring back, presumed gangbangers, well, there are other individuals we're concerned about. Next up, the Wisconsin Supreme Court weighs in on the FBI's arrest of Judge Hannah Dugan. We'll discuss that. Stay with us.